Well, for the next hour or so, I'll be talking a bit about well-being, stress, what do we know about it from the science, and just a few words of who I am, where I come from. I'm the head of a research unit called the Unit for Psycho-Oncology and Health Psychology, and I'm 50% professor at the Aarhus University Hospital and 50% at the Department of Psychology. And I've been working with mind, body, health psychology research for more than 30 years. And so this is sort of the knowledge that I'm building on in my talk today. I can say that most of our work at this unit is currently focused on cancer patients, psychosocial factors, and their relevance for cancer patients. We are especially focused on late effects after cancer and cancer treatments, and but we have other research projects as well, and over the years I've been sort of interested in stress as a broad term to describe how the life circumstances, the challenges that we meet in our life and our work, how they can affect our mental and physical health. So this is the basic topic. So I'll be talking a little bit about what do we know about stress, what promotes stress, just very little about what are the consequences of stress. I could talk for hours about that because that's something I find really interesting. I worked many years with in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, so we've been testing and checking how stress and how psychological factors can affect the immune system and how they can lead to inflammation, etc. And so that's one of the mechanisms through which psychological factors can affect physical health, but also mental health, by the way. So, so what are the consequences? Just a few words. But what is really interesting is also what really protects against stress. What are the individual factors that protect against stress? But more importantly, what are the institutional factors? So I'll be focusing a lot on what characterizes an institution and organization that will, everything else being equal, have fewer cases of stress among its members, and you can apply that to a university, and you can apply that to any organization, basically. So there's a lot of research telling us what really protects against stress and what promotes well-being. And everything I'll be talking about is based on the science. And sometimes we know a lot, sometimes we know less, but so that is basically the topics I'll be talking about. I don't know, how many of you read Danish or understand Danish? Most of you, but some probably don't, okay? Because this is my first slide. It's a copy or a citation from Magisterbladet, which is the journal of a union for academics. And some years back, many years back, maybe 7, 8 years back, there was a lot of discussion about that students are very stressed. So they claimed from one of their surveys that 4 out of 5 students are stressed. You think that's true? Okay. Well, one of the issues is what is really stress, but we'll return to that. But at the same time, there's been some surveys at Aarhus University where they've asked students both in 2011, 2014, and 17, have you experienced strong, intense stress symptoms in relationship to your studies? And then in 17, 20% will say yes, almost always or very often. In 14, 17% said so. In 11% said so. But I mean, is that 4 out of 5? Well, only, not even if you say that sometimes and almost always and often, and add them up, it'll be still only 49%. So it's only half. So that's kind of strange, right? Okay, but there seems to be an increase though. Okay, and here's another result from the 2017 survey. Here people, the students have been answering the questions, do I feel in general sort of, do I have a high level of well-being at my studies? 87% say yes. How does that match up? 4 out of 5 stress, but 87% feel that they really have a high level of well-being. How does that match? That's a paradox, right? So who's right here? That's interesting. I'm generally satisfied with my studies. 88%. That's pretty good, right? I can recommend my studies at Aarhus University to others. 88%, and it's even better than in 2014. It's probably not statistically significant, but anyway. So let's try and see what can how can we trust these numbers? So, okay. Well, first of all, what is stress research all about? Well, stress and well-being are like two sides of the same coin, more or less. So stress research is concerned with the study of various processes of human adaptation. So it's about adaptation to the challenges and threats of everyday life. So I mean, everybody will experience some challenges, something that's can be experienced as threatening or difficult that you have to deal with, and how you deal with that and how you adapt to that, that is what stress is all about. And it's also about how these processes may influence mental and physical health and quality of life in general. So this is generally what stress research is about. And let's just focus a bit on the stress concept. First of all, life is stressful. And it has always been stressful. I mean, if we go all the way back to when our forefathers walked around on the African savanna, there were a lot of threats. There were enemies, wild animals, etc. So from time to time, our forefathers would be stressed, of course. And evolution has equipped animals, including humans, with a stress response, which will help us deal with these stressors. So when we believe there is a danger, there'll be an activation of the autonomic nervous system, where there'll be a production of stress hormones, and these stress hormones will have a lot of effects on the cardiovascular system, on the immune system. It will increase the sort of readiness of the immune system. It will increase the inflammatory response also briefly. So if we are hurt somehow and we need a repair of our tissues, then the immune system is ready both to get rid of the bacteria and also help with the healing and so forth. So stress our stress response is generally been developed to help us deal with various types of threats. And when the threat is then over, then our stress response will return to normal or be reduced again. So that's basically what the stress response is about. We wouldn't survive if we didn't have a stress response. So, but what is the problem then? Maybe some people say that our life circumstances, the stressors that we meet in everyday life in modern society, are very different from the stressors that our forefathers met in their life. So maybe some of these stressors so maybe our stress responses are no longer adaptive in case of all these various new stressors that we meet in modern society. Maybe there's an evolutionary mismatch somehow. There are several examples of evolutionary mismatch. One is that we are genetically hardwired to really like sugar and really like fat. And that was excellent for our forefathers because there wasn't much fat and much sugar. So having a craving for sugar and fat would enable our forefathers to really focus on getting as much of that when it was available, and thereby sort of survive periods of starvation. But today we can get all the cheap sugar and fat we want. So now it's not very adaptive to have this genetically driven trait, right? So that's an evolutionary mismatch. Okay. So far so good. But even though life has always been stressful, more or less, and maybe in the later, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, maybe life has become more stressful. And what do we know about that? Well, these are some numbers from the Danish Institute for Public Health, which have been asking people since the mid-'80s or late '80s about their experienced stress. So how often have you felt nervous and stressed? That's a bad question, by the way, because you can be stressed but not nervous and so forth. So it's not a great measure of stress. But anyway, it seems that both men and women over the years until 2005 have experienced an increased stress. Later, they have started measuring stress with a better instrument than just a single item, single question. But still, you will see that there's an increase, especially among young people, especially among women compared to men, over the last from 2010 to 2017. And the only group where you see a drop is actually for people older than 75. They're less stressed than they were 10 years ago. So what's going on? Well, I think there can be a number of sort of societal factors that can explain the increased stress levels. First of all, the whole sort of job market has changed over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. If we go maybe just 25 years back, there were many more people engaged in physical work. It has sort of shifted towards more like service jobs and office jobs, et cetera. So the strains must sort of change from being primarily physical strain to psychological stress. So it's just a matter of demographics and changes in how people work in the job market. But there are other factors as well. Individualization. If we go 10, 20, 30, at least 50 years back, people were much more focused on the group or the class that they sort of were affiliated with. If you were working class, people would think of themselves as working class, as one group. They would be unionized much more than they are today, even though people are still pretty unionized, much unionized in Denmark. But this identity of me being a part of a group or a class of people, that has more or less disappeared. Now we're all individuals. So it has gone from a we to an I, and that's great in many ways. But it probably doesn't come without costs. And some of the costs are probably related to the lack of social support that you will find from when you belong to a group. So that's an issue. The freedoms have been have increased over the last half century or more. But that means also we have become more responsible for a lot of things, more responsible for our own success, etc., etc. And there's demands in terms of that we should be more flexible, we should be more mobile in our jobs, in our lives. There's global competition, not only economically, but also mentally. I mean, 30, 40, 50 years ago, your main competitor would be like the boy down the street or the girl down the street. Today it's people from all over the world. We've become more or less like an X Factor society. We compete all the time, and that can be stressful, of course, because as most people will lose out. Everybody gets voted home, right? And there's only one winner, and even they are not winners. Right? So there's global competition, and everybody strives after perfect jobs and perfect personal careers, and maybe social media is not really helping here because everybody's presenting him or herself as in their perfect life on the social media, so everybody else gets envious and so forth, and believes that everybody else is doing great. So there's some issues there. There's demand for success. We have an achievement ideology, which can be stressful. I mean, there's a lot of good things about it, but there are costs, and the costs may be, we may see that in terms of increased stress levels. There's a merging of work and free time. People can work 24 hours. The technology will help us. I mean, you can study for 24 hours, right? Because you can be on the internet all the time. People can work for 24 hours. In the old days, people, went home and that was it. After work, there's a lot of commuting. The prices of houses and rents go up, so people have to move further and further away from the center and commute for hours. And the more you commute, some people, like I've lived in New York, people may have like 4, 5, 6 hours of commuting each day, and that's pretty stressful. And the communication technology is also a stressor. This is just some interesting research. There's some studies showing that the mere presence of one's own smartphone will induce a brain drain or reduce one's cognitive resources. So what they're doing in this study was that they were testing working memory capacity and another concept called fluid intelligence. So it's about your cognitive abilities. And there were 3 conditions. In one condition, the participants could they had to lay their smartphone on the table next to the computer where they were doing the test. In another group, they could bring their phone in, but they had to have it in their pocket or in the bag. And the third group would have to leave their smartphone or their phone in another room. And you can see how, the results here. So the ones that left their phones in another room were simply doing better cognitively than those who had their phones right either in their pocket or on the desk. That's pretty surprising, right? So even though you're not looking at it, just having it on you will drain your cognitive capacity. So that's interesting. Okay.